A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, and not with the wisdom of human eloquence, so that the cross of Christ might not be empty of its meaning. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the learning of the learned I will set aside. Where is the wise one? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made the wisdom of the world foolish? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not come to know God through wisdom, it was the will of God through the foolishness of the proclamation to save those who have faith. For Jews demand signs, and Greeks look for wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, Jews and Greek alike, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Verbum Domini. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord.
The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord.
Exalt you just in the Lord. Praise from the upright is fitting. Give thanks to the Lord on the harp. With the 10-string lyre chant his praises.
The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord.
For upright is the word of the Lord, and all his works are trustworthy. He loves justice and right. Of the kindness of the Lord, the earth is full.
The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord.
The Lord brings to naught the plans of nations. He foils the designs of peoples. But the plans of the Lord stands forever, the design of his heart through all generations.
The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord.
Vigilant at all times and pray, that you may have the strength to stand before the Son of Man. Alleluia,
Dominus vobiscum.
et cum spiritu tuo.
Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Matteum.
Gloria a tibi, Domine.
Jesus told his disciples this parable. The kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish ones were taking their lamps, brought no oil with them, but the wise brought flasks of oil with their lamps. Since the bridegroom was long delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight there was a cry, "Behold the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those virgins got up and trimmed their lamps. the foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise ones replied, "No, for there may be not enough for us and you. Go instead to the merchants and buy some for yourselves." While they went off to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went into the wedding feast with him. Then the door was locked. Afterwards, the other virgins came and said, "Lord, Lord, open the door for us." But he said in reply, "Amen, I say to you, I do not know you. Therefore, stay awake, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
Verbum Domini.
St. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, in essence is telling the Christians that while the Jews are running away from the cross and while the Greeks are running away from the cross, the Christians, call us fools, are running to the cross. And the cross, as he says, is a stumbling block for the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. It doesn't mean that as Christians we fully understand the cross, and yet in our faith we know, and in our experience we know that we need to cling to the cross. For the Jews, they had an idea of what the Messiah was supposed to look like, an idea that they had created in their own mind over time, and they had forgot the prophecy that the Messiah would be one who was to suffer. They were looking for this political leader. They were looking for someone to come and enter into or ratify the way they were living, not someone who was going to challenge them, but someone who was going to challenge the worldly powers, going to challenge Rome and all the other worldly dominations in which they had suffered under. But here along comes Jesus, the true Messiah, and he doesn't go after the Romans. He goes after the leaders of the Jewish people. And he says, you need to change. Well, they didn't like that, as we know. And then, if the nothing proved that this was not the Messiah to them, the fact that he was crucified certainly told the Jewish people, well, any man that hangs upon a tree is cursed. This had been a phrase in their belief system for a long time. And so if this is truly the Messiah, if you are truly the Messiah, you come down from that cross. And what did Jesus do out of love? He remained on the cross. And so they looked at him and look at him as one who is cursed. Certainly, this man could not be God. That's the approach that the Jews would take. That this man, Jesus, could not be God. And how dare he, not only did he reign from the cross, you might say, but then he had the nerve to invite his followers to reign with him from the cross. This is what he says to each one of us. Pick up your cross and follow me. And he invites us really to that perfect identification with him, that we hang upon the cross with him. This is what our life is to be. That's the perfect identification with Christ. So while the Jews are emphasizing this stumbling block that Jesus is, certainly this man cannot be God, the Greeks look at him and say, this man cannot be God. They emphasize the last part of that same sentence. that this man, Jesus, cannot be God. That was impossible for them. For the Greeks argued that if God could feel joy or sorrow or anger or grief, it meant that some human being had exercised some sort of influence over God, or shown that humanity was more powerful than this God, and so it couldn't be God. This was impossible for them. For the Greeks, God was this, a God was one who was so separated and distant from human experience that he could not be affected by that. He was incapable of experiencing our feelings. And so then to look at Jesus on the cross and we say, okay, this is one who, out of love for us, out of compassion for us, out of a loving concern and care for us, he took upon himself everything, all of our sin, and he experienced everything that we experience as man but sin. Well, the more you keep speaking that Christian message, the further and further away the Greek person got, or the Greek believer, you philosopher, you might say, got away from that, because they said, well, this is more, keep talking, and it's more and more and more and more impossible that that man is God. And so this is what St. Paul is ultimately emphasizing. St. Augustine had even said that in his study of philosophy, he could find many parallels from Greek philosophy to the Christian message, and that's very true when you study philosophy. But he said one of the things that is clearly missing is this phrase, that the Word became flesh. He said that in Greek philosophy, that is an impossibility, that God could participate in our humanity. And certainly, if that's impossible, God dying for humanity is absolutely impossible. So this is what St. Paul is speaking of when he says that this is a stumbling block. Jesus crucified is a stumbling block for Jews and foolishness for Greeks. And yet, it is true wisdom. He is true wisdom for the Christian believer, for those of us who have received the light and the gift of faith. Because our experience is that in Jesus crucified is the height of the revelation of God. In the cross, we come to know God. If you just think about it in our own lives, none of us wants to grab a hold of that cross, but every one of us knows we have to. And it's in the moment that those moments of suffering, many times the moments of darkness, the challenges in our life when the cross does present itself front and center in our lives, it is there that we meet Christ and we encounter God. We come to a deeper understanding and an awareness of his love for us and of his presence in our life. And so as we gaze upon the cross, what do we discover? We learn of the love of God. We learn of the mercy of God. We learn who God is by looking upon Jesus crucified. We learn the meaning and the purpose of life. And as we seek to have union with God, we go there to the cross and we see manifest there the will of the Father, and how it is that we are to live our life in our own conformity to Christ, our union with Christ. We attain union with God by embracing the will of God. Isn't this what Jesus did? That he was reunited with his Father, so to speak, or more perfectly united with his Father in embracing that very will of the Father in his death on the cross and then his rising for us. And so again, looking at the cross, we learn how to live. We imitate the obedience of Christ, the humility of Christ, and we experience in our life the power of God when we embrace the cross of Jesus. So certainly it may be a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles, but as St. Paul ends this section of his letter to the Corinthians, to those who are called, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength.